Hi, Peter. How are you?
Good morning, Simon. I'm good, or good afternoon, I guess, for you.
Yeah, thank you for joining us so early. You're in Toronto now, right now, and
I
it's
am. I am
7.
based in Toronto, Canada. So we're 7 a.m.
Brilliant. Well, listen, thank you very, very much for taking time out to join us for this podcast for Recruitment Transactions. Really appreciate it.
My
And
pleasure.
I know you pretty well, but it'd be really helpful for our viewers if you could just kind of just walk us through your career in a couple of minutes. Yeah, in the recruitment and staffing industry, obviously.
Yeah, well, I think like most people, the recruitment industry wasn't a planned career choice; it was an accident. And but it started many, many years ago, and joined a boutique firm in Vancouver, British Columbia, when I was quite young in 1993. So I'm coming up on 30 years in the industry. But really, it's chunked into, I'll call it, three chapters. First chapter was with Locke, which was pretty significant. Spent 22 years with that organization. I essentially took it from a three-person boutique firm in Vancouver to becoming one of Canada's largest professional staffing firms, really focused in sales, marketing, commercial, and senior leadership within pharmaceutical, medical, consumer goods, and industrial operations. So we grew to 10 offices, about 60 people, and yeah, we had a really, really good run. Then, subsequent to when I left Locke in '93, joined an organization called Conroy Ross Partners, which was going through an interesting evolution of merging with several organizations, with the idea to scale, grow, and sell, which we were successful in that transaction in 2020, the end of 2020, December, and now I've sort of moved to a new chapter where I've joined an organization called IQ Partners, where we're scaling and growing that organization, and also involved with an organization called Recruitment Entrepreneur International. So lots of fun stuff on the go.
Fantastic. And what is the market like in Canada these days in terms of, where's the concentration of activity by city, by sector, if you like, and also M&A activity? What are you seeing there?
Yeah, so I mean, the general framework of the Canadian marketplace, I mean, as many people might know, we are large in geographic mass and relatively small in population, so the second largest geographic country in the world, but with only about 35 million people now, I think. And we're concentrated in several, core cities, and all of which, interestingly enough, I think it's 90% of the population lives within 200 kilometers of the U.S. border. So it's like everything is right along the base. And obviously, the largest economic center is Toronto, and then from there you've got Vancouver, Montreal, Calgary, and Edmonton. And then in terms of sectors, obviously very resource heavy base. So we've got a lot of oil and gas and mining, forestry. But then also a lot of other commercial industry. We've become a big startup capital. We've got Silicon Valley North. A lot of the tech companies have created hubs. So Meta and Facebook and Amazon all have big hubs up here, especially with remote work. And so yeah, it's become a very interesting marketplace. Additionally, because we are so closely connected to the U.S. economy, both in terms of our trade as well as just geography, we're a bit of a feeder nation to the U.S. for expats. So a lot of organizations will bring executives through Canada as they're rising in their career on their way to more senior roles in global head offices, either in Europe or in Canada.
Got it. And in terms of M&A activity, obviously I'm aware of the transaction that you guys did with Gallagher, but outside of that, anything of note that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, I think it's evolving. I mean, I think we all recognize that M&A activity within the recruitment space, we're kind of lagging a little bit behind a lot of other sectors, but I think it's becoming more in vogue for a number of reasons. I think the first and primary reason is that we all know that organic growth in this industry is really hard. It's hard to move, billers and top talent from one firm to another because it's just a difficult process to create value differentiation, and there's a lot of obstacles to making that change. So, I think a lot of organizations have recognized that acquisitions or mergers is a faster way towards growth, but not without its challenges. So we're starting to see more and more. I think part of it in Canada is geographic growth. So you'll see firms that are maybe based in one market and looking to get into other markets and looking at merging that way. And then obviously sector growth. So a lot of the big global firms, as they've come into some of the big executive firms, have bought organizations in order to expand their. So companies like Odgers and Egon and others over the years have bought and acquired firms to create their footprint here in the Canadian marketplace.
Wonderful. Now, you mentioned to me on a previous call that you had an exit of sorts when you left Lock Search, I found it a really interesting model because it's not a common one in the executive
No,
search or
no.
recruitment market. You talk us through that.
Yeah, the founder had a vision. We were probably about midway through our scaling and growth, and the recognition that the senior people within the organization were looking for participation and equity in the business. And the model was really intended never to go outside of the organization. It was never intended to create a share value that would be sold externally out of the company, but truthfully to create more of a succession plan for future generations, so that the equity partners would realize value and growth in their equity based on multiples that had created internally, and then at the point of exit they would sell those shares back to the founder or to other rising potential partners in the organization. So it was effective. It was unique in that we obviously sought outside counsel and support to build the shareholders agreement and to create the valuation structure. But truthfully, the valuation structure was a little bit, it was accurate, but it probably wasn't to market value because it was never really intended to be an externally valued, sort of a transaction. So, but it was effective.
I've seen something like that in law firms in the
Yeah,
past.
it's very similar. It was sort of based on that model within law firms and accounting and professional services, where the actual ownership was always intended to stay internally, and then just create this evolution of succession for the partners and in terms of their exit, as well as the rising talent within the organization.
And was that in place when you joined Lock, or it evolved during your journey?
No, I mean I was literally employee number 3. And as we built the firm and got to a size and scale where there was a recognition that if something wasn't put in place, and I sort of say that recruiters and people in the recruitment space generally have that 7-year itch where if they're in an organization and they've been there for a while and they're having great success, they all start to contemplate, should I do this on my own? Should I stay with this firm, or should I look at other opportunities? But equity is a big, important piece. So I think we were at that place where we had a lot of individuals that were being, well compensated and certainly having great success. But at the end of the day, we're looking for participation in some format or another.
Got it. And you mentioned you were part of Conroy Ross and mergers with other businesses. I think Optimum Talent was one, and then ultimately that was sold to AS Gallagher, right? So were you brought in specifically to engineer that, or did you have another functional role within that group?
No, I had another functional role as well. So I was president of the central region for the merged organization. So I ran essentially the largest region in Ontario, and in terms of our P&L and all lines of business. So when we merged the organizations, the thinking was that as part of bringing them together, we needed to have, every region had different needs, and they were at different iterations of their development and growth. And so we intentionally structured it in a way that they would have, sort of regional leadership running the P&Ls and all the people and the business within that.
Got it. So the businesses were being merged. Was there a specific vision or plan to kind of accrete talent and value and flip that on or sell that to a larger player? Was that always part of the game plan?
Yeah, and that was actually what was really intriguing to me, that there was a vision in place, that the two primary organizations, there was a couple others that were brought in as well, but Optimum Talent and Conroy Ross were two organizations that really had this vision of scaling and growing, and uniquely positioned, because Conroy Ross was a pure executive search firm, and Optimum Talent, although it had a certain portion of executive search, was primarily a career transition and outplacement firm, as well as an assessment and leadership shop. So by bringing these two organizations together, we had this vision of creating a truly full suite of talent management services that would support our clients in a holistic way, that we could be at the table with them, designing strategy, building their teams internally, supporting them when they were going through, transition and having to exit employees, and then of course, identifying top talent and bringing them in through our search function. So it was a really interesting model, and very successful. We realized, and not without some growing pains and some challenges along the way, and some economic hits, and the usual things that happen in the course of business. But what was interesting is that we actually had a date on the calendar that we were going to, our plan was to go to market and transact in 2020. And I'll tell you, for many of the years when we would review that plan, I thought, there is no way this is happening. That I wasn't confident that we would be able to achieve that goal, but in fact we were fortunate that we executed the plan, and we were able to transact. And like I said, it was December 2nd was when the actual deal closed.
So do you partner with a corporate finance boutique or some sort of investment bank, or like how did that come together?
Yes, we did. So we went to, I think I shared with you, we went to market in, I'll say it was sort of late summer of 2019, and went through a traditional process where we put the investment deck together and put it out to market. I think they took it to, I don't know, a couple of hundred organizations, international, local, small, large, combination of private equity, direct competitors. But again, because we had this unique sort of option of business functions and training and development, as well as career transition, it probably opened up the lens a little bit to a broader audience, because it wasn't just purely search. And so went through that process through the fall of 2019, and really got pretty close. We were coming down to the wire with 3 organizations that had were getting ready to go through due diligence, and we had this sort of timeline that we were going to plan to close or make a commitment and sign a deal sometime in March or April of 2020. And then of course we had this little thing come along in January called COVID, which threw a bit of a wrench in our plans, and all 3 suitors essentially stopped returning our calls and said maybe not right now, because everybody was focused on their internal business and keeping their house in order. And so we had to quickly turn our attention from the process of transacting and selling to making sure that we had a business that would be viable to sell in 6 or 8 months' time. So we hunkered down and did all of the things that most organizations were doing at the time around protecting our assets and taking care of the people, and ensuring that we shored up our business. But ultimately, we were fortunate that Gallagher, who was one of those shortlisted organizations, came back to us in, I think it was around September, and said, okay, we're ready to re-engage. And so then kind of went into a fairly aggressive and I'll say a bit of a hurry up offense, and went through that process from September to ultimately a close date of December 2nd.
And what was the level of awareness amongst the people in the companies, the staff, the billers? Were they aware that the company was on the market? Because it went out to so many people. Were rumors not flying in? And
fortunately not. I mean, you always take that risk. I mean, even though there's NDAs signed and confidentiality agreements, I think you always run that risk. I think that we had socialized the concept within the broader organization around a strategic plan that looked at M&A activity and growth that could see us acquiring organizations or us potentially being acquired. But it was more of a longer term plan that these are part of the things that we're going to continue to explore in order to build and grow a premier organization. But certainly the knowledge around the transaction was restricted to the partner table, the owners.
And let's talk about Gallagher, because that's not a typical strategic acquirer in the recruitment and staffing space, right? This is more service line expansion for a quite different business, right?
Yeah, so the core business for AJ Gallagher is insurance. They're an insurance brokerage company. But through that, they also have a consulting practice. So it's called, and that consulting would be everything from, the health and benefits, compensation, anything that related to, that insurance or human capital practice. And so they had, through other previous acquisitions. So I guess it would be important to note that Gallagher's growth strategy is purely an acquisition strategy. They probably do I don't know, I'll throw it out there and say, 15, 20 acquisitions a year throughout North America and the UK. So, this is something that is, they have an entire M&A team that is focused on growth through acquisition. And I think through some of those smaller acquisitions previously, they recognized that there was this opportunity to increase their service offering and really be a differentiator to their competitive set. The buyers of their services were similar to the buyers of our services in terms of career transition, leadership development, as well as executive search. So there was an opportunity to sort of blend and optimize that. And so, yeah, it was a little bit unique, but when you look at the fundamentals, it was an opportunity to expand their footprint within existing clients and expand their client base as well.
Yeah. So I remember way back in the day in Hong Kong, A.T. Kearney, the consulting firm, had an executive search arm, and I think they had to get rid of that or they shut it down.
So one of the iterations of Optimum Talent was A.T. Kearney in Canada was part of that was acquired by Optimum Talent many years ago.
Oh,
So
is that
that
right?
was one of the, yeah, so small world.
Right, right. Now I'm just wondering whether that then potentially could be an issue for A.S. Gallagher, just in terms of, conflict of interest, just with the search side. I'm not sure, but certainly with
Yeah,
A.T.
I mean,
Kearney,
I
seems.
think it's like anything else, that the bigger you get, the more challenges you face in terms of, conflicts of interest and service lines crossing over. But, for now, it seems to, they have a structure that seems to be working well.
Got it. And I mean, when you look at that acquisition itself, like how do you evaluate it? From what worked and what didn't work?
Yeah, I mean, I think overall, I'd say it was a resounding success. But like with anything, you can look back and in hindsight, it's 2020, and you can look at things that could have been done better. I think that integration is always the biggest challenge, and it doesn't matter. The Historically, they would have been acquiring other insurance brokerage companies. So basically businesses that were exactly in their line of business with exactly the same structures and probably similar software systems and all of the nuances of the business, and that they understood intimately. So it's easy to tuck those under. You can literally, sort of, turn off the sign on Friday and start up with the new brand on Monday, and very little has changed. In this case, it's a little bit different. So I think there was some uncertainty as to at what point were they going to merge in terms of branding and oversight. So I think we originally had anticipated that the brand and the organization would be run independently for a period of a couple of years before it was integrated in. I had left the organization shortly after the transaction, so I was not part of the decision making. But from what I understand, they did start to integrate a little bit faster than originally anticipated, and there's probably some really good reasons for that, but also some challenges that come with that as well.
So what was the lock-in period for the partners? It sounds quite short in this case.
It was different in each case. So when I
Yep.
left, and I stayed. I spent a year consulting in a different industry altogether. And there's your usual non-competes and non-solicits. But it really was tied to there were sort of some incentives that were put in place to stay. But there weren't any restrictions.
Got it. And I know it's sensitive, and it's probably not a matter of public record, but can you give us any indication of where we were in terms of multiples on the deal, and how that was in terms of the market as a whole, and why
Yeah,
it
it was
be
it
where
was
it was?
unique.
Yeah.
It was unique and attractive just because, as I said, they're an organization that is built on acquisition, and so they have sort of a standard formula that they operate under. And again, without describing numbers and all that kind of stuff, what's interesting is that they have this idea and concept which is valid, and this was unique to me. I'd never seen this before because they're a publicly traded company. They have a multiple that they trade at on the market. And so fundamentally, as long as they are buying at a lower multiple, then immediately they get the lift on that acquisition overnight because of their overall trading shares. So there's that nice little gap there, and so typically what they'll do is they'll come in at a lower multiple and then create some opportunity to achieve upside over the following couple of years as part of the earnout. But I would say that the multiple was higher than any other that we had seen in the marketplace from what I would say competitive organizations. So it was unique.
Fantastic. What are they trading at publicly, like mid-teens or something, or
Yeah,
what sort of rate?
yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I can understand. Amazing. Congrats on that. It sounds like a really, really interesting and unusual deal. It seems to be
It was a
worth.
journey. I'll say that much. It's there was lots of these things is they all anytime there's a transaction of any sort in any industry, it looks great when the headlines come out and the press releases come out, but there's always a lot of blood, sweat, and tears behind the scenes in order to get to that place, and lots of times
No,
where you think it might come off the rails.
believe me, I've been there several
Yeah,
times
I
selling and
know.
buying in Asia, as you know. I'm just thinking, like, obviously unusual with COVID, and I'm not sure, how much due diligence was done, remotely in virtual rooms or, on site or whatever. But when you look back at those frenetic 3 months, I think September through to the end of the year, it's still a relatively short period of time. My deal took 5-6 months with Recruit Holdings to close. Um, did anything, I mean, if you could go back again, would you change anything? I say that because some of the deals I've been involved with Recruit Holdings where we bought in Asia, I think we just focused a little bit on the finances, and there was kind of a feel good factor with the owners of those businesses, and probably not enough time and attention was put in terms of post-merger integration and what would that look like, and what are you thinking on ATS integration, and what are you thinking about branding timelines, and what are you thinking about specialization and comp plans and learning and development, all these different things. It kind of evolved post-deal, and we figured that out in some cases, and we didn't in others. So I'm just curious, anything you can share within the
Yeah.
realm of confidence with us be great.
Yeah, I think I would echo a lot of those sentiments. So in fairness, when you look at the timeline of the deal, although that September to December was really short, the reality is that those conversations had started well over a year earlier. They just kind of took a pause in the middle, but there had been a lot of information sharing and a lot of collaboration. We'd actually done some, because they were not in our industry. We actually did some collaborative projects with them in the marketplace. So we did a couple of webinars where we could collaborate together. So we were kind of feeling each other out a little bit in terms of how we work together in the marketplace. But I think to your point, I don't think that from a transaction standpoint, that any of the partners would do it differently in terms of making the decision, because I think it was a great decision for both organizations. But to your point, I think you can never fully anticipate all the integration challenges. So I think we probably could have spent a little bit more time, defining timelines and periods and who's doing what and roles and responsibilities and structure ultimately in the long run.
Fantastic, Peter. I've taken some of your time today. Really appreciate it. It's early in your morning, and we've got some really interesting insights from you in a market that I don't know a huge amount about, but I do now. I feel it. I thank you for the geography lesson early on.
Yeah, no, well,
Uh,
it's a unique marketplace, and I do think now that sort of as we all kind of look at the expansive marketplace, I am quite confident that we're going to see an increased number of transactions in this sector in the coming years, because it's such a decentralized market, and so I think there's just a huge opportunity, and it's a combination of organizations in our space, but also private equity is going to be looking to get in and see this as an opportunity for consolidation and growth.
Fantastic. Well, thanks again for your time. I'm looking forward to many more collaborations
Absolutely.
with you, and I'm sure we'll keep in touch.
Absolutely. Thanks, Simon.
Brilliant. Thank you.